Now I'd like to welcome again Lafifa, who will talk to us about the national initiative she is involved with and about how that organization works and how we can learn from that. Lafifa, over to you.
Thank you, Linda. So actually, I would like to talk about Bangladesh Women and Technology. This is an organization, this is a forum of women tech professionals. Mainly it was, it started its journey for the technology-driven people, women who are working in different fields. So the Bangladesh Women and Technology started its journey in 2010, and when it started, it has 3 different type of members. The tech people from who are working in academia, in different universities. We have some corporate professionals who are working in tech industries, and also we do have some entrepreneurs and startups who are doing their tech business. So the journey started with these 3 type of members. It started with 20 members, and now we have total 200 members in our umbrella. So Bangladesh Women in Technology is mainly dedicated to mobilize women involved in different levels of the technology industry and create a wide range of professional development and networking opportunities and make meaningful contribution in the growth of Bangladesh in the ICT sector. So when we started our journey with tech professionals, in 2020, actually we realized that we are doing a lot of activities for tech professionals, but who are in profession, they are already in one stage. But if we want to increase the number of women tech people, we need to actually focus on the students. And from 2020, actually, we started our student membership. So we started our different type of campaign programs in different campus, especially in different universities, where the students are doing their undergraduate studies in different type of technology-based subjects. So in 2020, January, February, and March, in 3 months, we conducted 3 programs. And after that, the pandemic started. So we closed all our offline activities, but we are doing our activities in online. So actually, what are the activities we are doing? So if we say that what is the mission of our organization, what is our vision? Our main mission is empower women to achieve success through technology and drive change in the Bangladesh technological industry. So how we encourage women? We encourage women in Bangladesh in technology entrepreneurship, embrace careers in technology, and empower these women to grow by providing technology awareness as well as education, leadership development, networking, and mentoring. So we say that we have 3 objectives: empower, connect, and grow. So we offer this platform of Bangladesh Women in Technology to perform it is a platform for skill development to create the appropriate skill set. So what type of skill development programs do we offer? So we do have a different type of skill development programs. It's different for different level of professionals. Like we see that there are a lot of skill development programs for the beginners or who are in the mid category, but who are already in advanced position. We don't offer that much programs in other like that. So in Women in Technology, as we have a different level of technology women, so actually we do organize different type of skill development programs. Like who are already skilled people, they offer programs for the mid category people. Who are in mid category women, they offer programs for the beginner women. So actually in the network, some acts as a mentor and some acts as a mentee. And for the entrepreneurs, sometimes we found that they actually struggle to find their fundings. So the startup companies, they struggle to fund the fundings. So we do arrange networking opportunities with different types of angel investors. with different type of venture capital companies. So they come, so they came to know about the startups, they came to know about the entrepreneurs, and like they arrange some funding, we arrange some funding opportunities for them also. And also with the government, we do work with the small and medium entrepreneurs, SMEs. So what type of a program we arrange for them? Like we arrange different type of training programs. There are some freelancers in our community, so we do arrange different type of training programs for freelancers. Some want to learn like web development program. Some want to learn about the graphics designing programs. So we do arrange this type of programs so that they can enhance their skill under our umbrella. And for the students, so as we said that when we started our student membership, the pandemic started and we started all the programs online. So we did offer various type of programs. Actually, we first wanted to know the interest of our students. So some were saying that like we want to learn more about programming, and they wanted to learn more about Python programming. So we offered online free Python development programs, and the students joined in our programs. The program is actually not only closed for the student member of BWIT, it is actually open for all, but for the member of our organization actually can enroll the programs without any fees. For others, we do charge a small amount of fees. So in this way, actually, we are working, and also our government is also helping us, and especially our government is organizing some programs especially for online women harassment. So nowadays, we know that online women harassment is a problem. So actually, we offer different type of training programs so that our girls came to know how they can be safe in the internet, and if they face any problem through internet, what to do, where they can go, and what are the supports. So our government has some hotlines for online women harassment problems, and we also are working with the government for that also. So this type of program actually we offer from BWIT.
Thank you very much indeed. Again, do you have any questions from our online or offline audience? And do you know what happens if you don't ask your questions? Then I ask questions. So it's you're live, it's hard to address you. So Lafifa, in my own experience, sometimes it's more difficult for women to find funding than it is for men to find funding. So were your entrepreneurs, were they having difficulties finding funding because they're women, or just because it's difficult to find funding?
Especially we find that when the women start the business, actually they are not that much sincere about like the paperwork. So when they go to the bank for any type of loan, so the bank doesn't give them loans because their bank account and the other TIN certificate registrations, they were not properly done. But usually the male peer, they are more organized to start the business. So we found that this is a problem. And sometimes like we do organize this type of programs where we tell them like what to do. I'm from academia, I'm not doing this, but our members who are entrepreneurs, actually they offer this type of guidance programs, that what they have to do. Especially during the pandemic time, we found a lot of women are there doing e-commerce business, F-commerce businesses. But actually they just started, as they were at home, they just started without any plan. But after 6 months, they're facing that they cannot grow. So we do offer sometimes some programs for them so that they know how to start, how to do registration for their program, for their organization, how to do registration for TIN certificate, for government birth certificate, these things.
Thank you. And I have another question if the audience has no question. I'm looking madly. No, I can't see anyone.
Sorry, Linda, I do have a question.
Sorry, Gabby, you're on my panel, please. Your microphone's
So
there.
you mentioned this basically
Microphone.
internet safety for girls, and I'm really interested because we, like in Australia, where I used to work, we had this case that it turned out that female students face really a lot of harassment, but one problem really was that we felt that the awareness of the male students often wasn't there, that some things like jokes they perceived as completely harmless, you know, what kind of effect they had. So we also felt that we needed to do something to basically include the male students. Like there was nothing we could think of to kind of just by talking to the female students to protect them. But
our programs is actually not only for women. When we offer any program, it is open for all, but we mainly focus on our members, but anyone can join our programs also. And regarding the internet safety, actually we found the main problem is the lack of awareness. This is the main problem. So that people actually doesn't know like how to be safe in the internet. Like sometimes they exchange some personal photographs, they are even giving the password to the boyfriend. So these are the problems. So we say that never ever share the password with your boyfriend. So when your boyfriend asks for the password for you, always think that he is not your well-wisher. So just break up. Don't give the password, just break up.
It could be the best advice all day, no?
thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much indeed,
Thank
Lafifa.
you.
I'd like to
Thank
thank
you very
Lafifa
much.
for her contribution. Okay, now we have me again, as next on the list. But I'm not on my own this time, so Gabriella and I both work in the Netherlands. Gabriella works at the University of Utrecht, and I work at CWI and also the University of Utrecht. And let me start this timer. And this is about the Dutch National Initiative, where I'm going to give a very short introduction about how we set up the National Initiative, and then Gabriella can say about the things that this initiative does. The initiative is called, I'll get this right, Equality, Diversity and Inclusion. And the way it has been formed is that we have a Dutch equivalent of Informatics Europe. And the Dutch equivalent is called ICT Research Platform Netherlands. I didn't name it. And there, all the computer science departments in the Netherlands are automatically members of this particular platform. And a few years ago, they restructured the whole organization. And as part of that, they wrote a constitution. And I was very honored to be asked to help write that constitution. And if MD involves me in a process like that, then, you know, paragraph number 2 is make sure you increase diversity, in particular with gender. So that went into the constitution, that the organization would be there to support the attraction and sustainment of women in the network in the Netherlands. And out of that, I decided that what we needed was a parallel, I'll try again. The members of the platform were basically the heads of department, and the chair at the time was very insightful and asked every department to have 2 people to sit at that table, because at the time in the Netherlands, I think all but one head of department was a male, so that if only the heads of department were invited, you'd have an almost all-male meeting. So the chair at the time said, what we need is 2 representatives, and please make sure one of them is a woman. And he was fairly explicit about that, which caused a bit of a stir in the Netherlands at the time. It's like, I don't know if anyone's Dutch, you can. So that worked, certainly in the first couple of years. After the first couple of years, it was a bit more difficult because the number of senior women in the departments was such that if one woman had served 2 or 3 years in this organization, then it was hard to find another woman to take her place. But anyway, we are getting better. So in parallel to this part of the organization, I felt what we needed was a network of representatives of each department who would be able to talk to the management about activities that would help women in the department, either students or at the academic level. And after, actually, it took about 2 years, to be perfectly honest, to email the heads of departments and say, give me the name of a volunteer. And the heads of departments would, they have important things to do, so it took a while to get those names together. And once we did that, to be honest, there weren't very many professors in that list, partly because the number of female professors in computer science in the Netherlands isn't that high. However, having gone through all these teething problems, I'm very happy to say that about 2 years ago, 1 year ago, I can't remember.
Yeah, in May 2020, actually.
May 2020, Gabriele agreed to become co-chair of this group, and our other co-chair is Marieke Huisman, who is part of the EUgain network, so you will get to meet Marieke at some point. And I would like to hand over to Gabriele to explain what this now functioning network does and why it's a good thing to have.
Thank you, Linda. Yeah, so the idea behind the network is basically to work towards increasing equality, diversity, and inclusion in ICT in the Netherlands. And so it's not just kind of gender balance, but we also want to increase the number of kids who come from non-academic background and study computer science, different cultural backgrounds, different immigration status and the like. And Marieke and I thought about that what we don't want to do is just kind of start some new additional initiatives, because it was 2020, everyone was already quite exhausted with the whole COVID situation. So what we thought was we should use the network basically to coordinate and support existing initiatives. And I can give some examples. So one thing, for example, was we realized that the visibility, and I think multiple speakers talked about that today. So the visibility of female researchers is often not as big, because they are as great, because they are not that good at promoting ourselves. So kind of one thing we did was create a list of female ICT researchers together with their specialty and their expertise, so that people, if you're looking for a keynote speaker for a conference and would like to have a female speaker, or people from the press do need an expert and want to look for a female expert, they basically have one place to go to. Another thing we were looking at was the whole COVID situation. I think basically almost everyone was negatively affected by it, but we also realized that people from minority groups are disproportionately affected. They often don't have the networks, the support system. So in the whole process, if you're kind of doing your PhD, if you're on a tenure track, this has to be taken into account. And at the moment, basically, I think across the board, most universities really try to do that and commit to it. But we are kind of concerned that long-term, like hopefully in a couple of years, we can forget about the COVID situation, but the effects will linger on. So we think it's important that we keep monitoring that the head of departments do keep taking this into account if they assess in 3-4 years' time someone on a tenure track, what kind of effects this has. So we basically, because as Linda said, we have representatives from every university, every Dutch university, at least every Dutch university with an IT department on the board. So we go back to the head of schools basically and head of department and ask them, what are your plans? What are your strategies? Another initiative, what we're trying to do is attracting basically more diverse set of students from the school to study computer science. And for that, like the first step was to just get an overview. There are lots and lots of initiatives already. Lots of universities have something like they visit schools, they visit primary schools or high schools. So to get an overview and hopefully kind of combine our effort, because another issue, and that came up, I think, several times again, is people who are active in this field are also kind of exhausted. We really need to think strategically how we can bundle our efforts and basically save energy so that we can be as effective as possible. So far, basically, we've made this list so that also students or parents, if they are interested in what kind of initiatives are there nationwide, have a central place to go to. And then probably the biggest thing which came out of the group so far was by Marike Hausmann, the co-chair, and then Alexander Srebrenich, who's a professor at TU Eindhoven. So they compiled a report about best practices for recruitment, onboarding, and promotion of women in computer science. And for that, they basically interviewed representatives of each of the universities, what their experiences was with these three fields, like how can we best recruit more female ICT researchers, how can we make sure they actually stay and succeed. And they compiled a report on that, and it covered basically a lot of initiatives people thought worked at their department. So one thing that is really important, we realized, and that's not new, is really mentoring. But mentoring is not just important for the mentees, but mentoring is actually also important for the mentors. So often a lot of diversity initiatives like also cause a little bit of backlash. People feel like they are being left out or not, or think the problem is basically exaggerated. So if you get these kind of skeptical people on board to be a mentor and actually work with people, they usually kind of, people try and like to be part of the solution. And they can really see, what is going on, what kind of problems do female colleagues face, what kind of problems do people like from, in our case, like non-Dutch speaking background face. So mentoring is one big thing. Then another thing is that the way how job advertisements basically are worded can have a huge impact on how many female applicants we actually get. And one thing where this became quite clear, so in the Netherlands we had this issue from the government, so the technical universities or technical fields, was it just computer science for the sector build? So basically got just computer science. The universities got a number of positions funded by the government, additional positions, but they had basically, they had to fill 1/3 of the positions with female.
It was worse than that, it was 35%.
35%.
Which means 3 in 100 or 3 in 10 isn't enough.
Yeah.
It was very clever.
So we advertised, we tried to kind of make it attractive and point out that it's family friendly and so on, but at least at Utrecht in the first round, we were not very successful. We stayed well below the required 1/3, or 35%. And then we had a second round where we just basically advertised for female applicants, which was very it's kind of legally, it's borderline, and it's also kind of, I think, you can argue whether this is a thing we should do, but anyway, because we had to fill we had to have this 35% quota, this was done, and I personally was kind of really surprised. I thought, well, if in the first round we didn't get enough qualified female candidates, what's the point of advertising again, just for female candidates. But surprisingly, we got a lot of really highly qualified female candidates in the second round. So we had no problems filling the positions and actually filling more of the positions. And we couldn't, like I tried to find out, talking to the candidates, why they did not apply the first time around, but obviously like the sample size for that also wasn't big enough to get a representative answer. But I thought it was really interesting. We did not have to kind of compromise on the quality of the candidates at all. They were basically all the female researchers we employed were basically excellent. So somehow the fact that we explicitly advertised for female candidates did make a difference and did bring more female candidates in. Then kind of other factors which were kind of identified as being really important was childcare and parental leave. And for this report, basically, all of the women were the main focus, so that was focused on gender. But in general, most of the initiatives like mentoring, family-friendly policies and regulations, childcare, actually do benefit diversity across the spectrum. So I don't know if is this report, do you know, is that available, generally available, or is that only IPN? But it's definitely on the IPN website. So I think this report is really interesting. So these are basically just some of the examples of the IPN EDI.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Gabriella. Are there any questions for either Gabriella? Yeah, great. Oh, I see two hands. Or for Lafifa. So I didn't see who put up their hand first, but there were certainly two people there.
So, thanks.
Okay. If you could state your name and affiliation.
My name is Miguel Golão from Portugal. While you were talking, this triggered a couple of questions. One of them is, when you are talking about the pandemic, if you have any numbers in the Netherlands about how students were affected, how it led to dropouts. Because my experience in Portugal was, with a very small sample of my students, was that the women were more affected than men, unfortunately. So I had more female students with psychological problems because they were facing a lot at home. And this led to more dropouts or delays in finishing their dissertations. Not just women, but mostly women had this kind of problem. And I was wondering whether women who were going through these mentoring programs had a better time than the ones that were not, if you have any data on that. And also, thinking more on the perspective of the mentors, if you have found that there's incentive by the departments and recognition in terms of progression to committing time to this kind of task or not.
So if I can start basically Stackwise, so answering your last question first. I don't know who mentioned it this morning that the kind of Dutch academia is really moving from this kind of metric-based evaluation of people to more story-based, basically holistic evaluation. So there is not, at least not that I'm aware of, a kind of specific thing, kind of you don't specifically get credit for mentoring, but the university really supports this, and let's say you go for a promotion or you do your kind of yearly personal scan thing, then talking about these things, so these things are important and these things count towards the kind of contribution to the department or to the university. So this is really, I mean, we're basically on the start of switching from this kind of H-index amount of money you put in to this more story-based one. But I think there's really true commitment from the management to actually value these types of contributions. Then the second question was about if we have any measure, like if we measure, not that I'm aware of. That is a good point. So that's really something we kind of struggle with the whole diversity thing to some extent, because like gender is actually one of the easier things to measure and where we can measure the effect. But for example, we don't have no way of measuring also kind of socioeconomic, we don't know where our students come from. And I mean, even gender is sometimes a bit more difficult because we don't really ask people, so if they apply for a position, we talked about that over lunch, that, if we have to tell the department kind of how many male, female candidates apply, but if it's not explicitly on the application, it's kind of awkward to ask for it. So in some sense, like it's really hard to measure, and I think it's a bit invasive, and also clashes often with a European, like with a privacy thing to measure this, but it would actually be good to know these metrics and to see whether our initiatives have some, what the effect is. So now we don't have that. The one interesting basically data point there, and which also why I refer to the mentoring thing, there is a large study from, I think he's a sociology professor in Harvard, about the impact of different diversity metrics on minority groups. And because in the US, like I think they really kind of, the racial background and so on or ethnic background is tracked. So they could do that. So I can send you a link to that. That's the most kind of number-based study, and they collected these numbers over 20 years. So that's really interesting, and that's also where this mentoring thing comes from. Do you still have time for the last?
If it's quick,
What was the first question? So yeah, women more affected by COVID. Again, yes, but also in my group, also I see like also men who have like family, the younger the kids are, in my experience, like people with kids, and the younger the kids are, also male colleagues, like for them it was really, really tough. With the students, I don't know, I did also make a survey in my class to figure out in the beginning of the course, how they felt, but I think I have one female student in the class, so I couldn't really get very representative numbers there. And I don't know the gender of the people who replied, actually. So again, we're flying blind there a little bit.
There was also a question behind. Yeah.
Hello. Okay, it's working. Hello, my name is Paula. I also come from Portugal. All the Portuguese are very chatty. So I'm trying to gather my thoughts, but I think this is more of a comment than a question directly addressed to Gabrielle. But there's one thing that I totally agree with you. We do need a strategy. For example, even in the guidelines for mentorship, if we could share that would save a lot of work to people trying to start the same kind of initiatives. So I agree with you. However, from my experience, even if you only consider Europe, which we shouldn't, we are very diverse in terms of our laws and what's allowed and what it isn't, and what's the culture and what's not accepted in the culture. So for example, you were saying about, we eventually we advertised positions only for women. That wouldn't be allowed per our constitution. And it's tricky, as you said. So this question emerged in my head even when Geraldine was speaking in the morning. I think that so this is kind of a suggestion to Letizia and everybody in the EUgain action. And I think we really need to start thinking how we can affect policy and how can we act on the government, at least within Europe. Could we get in touch with someone who then can support us in this? Because the problem isn't us, but we aren't going to change heads of departments, universities, economic systems, because it's all about the money at the end of the day. Mm. So, yeah. So this is more of a comment. Maybe we will address it, but it's towards policy.
So again, in the Netherlands, the University of Groningen, they started with female fellowships a number of years ago, and they were called out, I think, by one of their own students for being discriminatory. And after that, I'm pretty sure the University of Delft did something similar, but they managed to learn from the Groningen case to get the wording right. And I'm not a lawyer, I don't know what the wording was, but since then, there have been a number of female fellowship initiatives in the Netherlands, and apparently Utrecht University were able to do this in a way that wasn't discriminatory. And I think the argument's along the lines that the women have always been discriminated against, and there's some evidence for that, therefore we're bridging the gap. But like I said, I'm not the lawyer.
It was because it was a temporary measure, and also, I mean, it was basically from a rule from the government. So we basically just implemented it. So it was kind of there. There is, but it caused a lot of discussion, and I'm not sure if it's a good. Yeah, it's difficult. It's really difficult.
We're running out of time, but I got a question on the chat from Lucia Hoppe, and she was directing it to Gabriella, oh dear, excuse me, I'm tired. Could it be that women applied to the women-only position because of the normal aggressive competition in these procedures? And the second part, do the women applying for this sometimes feel less good because it's a women-only position?
So for the first part, I think, so I kind of off record asked the people we interviewed kind of why they applied for this position. And one candidate said, well, everyone says basically, we also welcome application from female candidates, but there it was clear that you really meant it. With the kind of, did they feel, so I think the candidates we employed, they knew they were really on the top, and so on. But I know from one who got then as a comment from a colleague that you just got this job because you're female. So I think they knew they were good. So it was modular, the kind of imposter syndrome. I think most people have male or female, but yeah, it's definitely kind of a problem from the outside perception, at least with some people.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to close the session here. Having said that, there was a plan to have breakout rooms. I suggest that the people online, if they'd like to join a breakout room, that they join breakout rooms online. And I suggest that people in this room gradually move towards the tea and coffee outside in the room and talk to people about these issues. I did have some questions you had to answer for yourselves. I shall repeat them. Should existing networks connect better with EUgain? Should you initiate new networks, potentially at the national level? And after the break, we've got a couple of other ideas you could think about. So there are all these different levels. How can we make sure we get the expertise shared across these networks as efficiently as possible? And I think EUgain is the hub for doing this. Thank you for your participation so far. Okay, then I'd like to welcome everyone back to the session. And now we have far fewer topics to present to you. And I hope the breakout sessions were both tasty and inspiring. And after it's now a much shorter number of sessions, first about an Athena SWAN initiative in the UK, and then about a university initiative in Utrecht. Then we can open up for questions, discussion, and then a plenary discussion. So I'm really interested in the plenary discussion about what the next steps will be for all of our futures. Okay, then I'd like to ask Ivana to open the floor with her experiences in the Athena SWAN initiative. And Ivana, if you can also explain a little bit what the Athena SWAN initiative is, that'd be great. Thank you very much.
So Athena SWAN is an initiative that is created in the UK, which is all to do with advancing women's careers. It's kind of started in 2000s, kind of early 2000s. And it is really kind of the first formal way in which the higher structure, the kind of government structure has decided to address some of the issues in terms of the equality between the career opportunities between men and women. The initiative was started first for STEM subjects, like departments such as ours, for example, computer science department, mathematics and engineering. But then it has actually expanded much wider, and it is now working for a range of different subjects, history, social sciences, and just really across the board. So Athena SWAN is kind of an organization. It was started, which kind of set certain set of kind of requirements and describe these requirements. And then in case a university or a department satisfies a range of these different requirements, then they can put themselves forward for an award. And there are 3 different kinds of awards. There is bronze award, there is silver award, there is gold award. And then depending on where you are on your kind of path of equality in terms of between men and women, and depending on what actions you took in that direction and what impact you made, you can actually be awarded a different one of these 3 awards. So we as a department, we've for the first time applied for this. Athena SWAN went through this kind of application process to this charter back in 2011, and we've done quite a few actions. We applied to kind of, and we kind of recorded all these different actions and the impact that we made, and we were awarded bronze. And then a few years later, we were awarded silver, and then again silver. So this is just to kind of show you the path. So why did we as a department do that? Well, the charter is not officially government, and there is no law that makes a university or department have to apply for these awards and go through this Athena SWAN process. But lots of the funding bodies have been recently putting a condition in their funding that if you don't actually have one of the Athena SWAN awards, you can't get the funding. And this association between the funding and an incentive to apply has actually made the departments and universities be really aware and really kind of motivated to go through that process. Another thing was the prestige, and also kind of attracting the best staff or the best employees, because departments and universities who actually go through this process, they actually show that they have done and they put in place lots of different kind of work conditions, or let's say that they've really worked to kind of on a range of different action points that you discussed in the previous workshop. And so that people really feel much more inclined to work for those departments and to work for those universities who actually care about those topics and care about those issues and who actually went through the process. And the reason why I'm explaining this in detail is because actually when I was discussing with lots of European universities and I was talking about our kind of success story, which I will tell you in a moment what that was, I found that was actually one of the main questions when they asked me, what is the biggest change we can make at our universities? For me, that was actually one of those. Because for the change to happen, the actions have to happen hands-on from the team on the ground that's really working on them. But also they need to be from the big picture kind of motivated by kind of top down as well. So it has to be done bottom up and top down from the kind of policy makers, high management, or some kind of charters which are outside the university itself. Because those kind of charters can create a change on really kind of big scale and connect themselves to big funding bodies and then create motivation for the management at the university to actually then provide support and funding for the little team who is actually at the end doing the kind of hands-on work, which was the committee I was on. And we were that little team, putting in place childcare, career advancements, fellowship workshops, big social events, mentoring, money for all different kinds of returning back from after being pregnant or after absences from work, outreach and attracting more female students. We've put in place so many different actions. And we could do so, we could dedicate the time, we could dedicate the committee, we could dedicate the money because the head of the department was really supportive. And all the management were sitting with us on the same meetings. And I think it's all because it was very much driven from the top down. After 10 years of doing these actions and being supported in this way, the percentage of female academics in my department rose from 11% that was in 2011 to 21% in 2021. So this is a 10% increase, which is actually higher than any other department that we have in the UK that kind of such a steep and really powerful impact. And I believe this was because of the involvement at all different stages. I think that's kind of, in a kind of gist, what I think, what can be done, what impact can be made, which is something that we have achieved, and the necessary conditions for that impact to happen, that they really need, committed hands-on committee, committed management and leadership who provides resources and they listen what the committee says and they implement, and committed charter outside of university, supported and backed by funding agency and some kind of larger bodies where kind of, everybody chips in and everybody feels they are part of the same story. Now we all universities, all departments apply every 3 years to get this application. And we all kind of across the board, part of this one mission. And it's extremely powerful. Extremely powerful. I will just, I think, open floor for questions because I would love to contribute for more specific topics that you would like to discuss.
Yes, I suggest we move to Judith first, and then we'll come back to questions for both of you. Is that okay? Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, so I just want to follow on from that. It's kind of nice to go second because I can just pick up points, some of the interesting points, and definitely affirm some of those points. So I hadn't known, but I went back and looked, and Athena SWAN was created in 2005. As Ivana said, it was quite early. But in 2011, the chief medical officer in England said that unless you had an Athena SWAN Silver Award, you would not be able to apply for funding from the National Institute of Health Research. So suddenly everyone woke up and they thought, hey, we better do something about this because, it's hit, the medical field. It might hit us too in the sciences, so we should do something. So in my case, I was at Sussex University. We got an institutional award in 2013, and then we got our Engineering and Informatics Award in November 2014, and I headed up that initiative. The advice was to start a year beforehand before you wanted to submit the award, and I can assure you that that was needed. Certainly in my case, I think I spent the last month days, evenings, and weekends writing the report, because precisely, and I will end on a happy note, precisely because I think we didn't have the sort of support that Ivana was mentioning. So it was very much a tick box exercise. It was very much, we have to do this, we need to show that we have the award. It wasn't recognized, the work that was put into it wasn't recognized or valued. And to be honest, I did the work, I got the award, I decided I wanted nothing more to do with it, and so they gave me an extra course to teach as it's my reward for leaving. So I didn't feel very positive, but this has been a wonderful opportunity to look back, because our award at Sussex University was renewed in 2018. And I went back and looked at that, and I thought, I started something in difficult conditions, but I saw a team who built on that. We had a new head of department or head of school who actually valued the work that was being done. We had people who were more committed. And I could see that I started something maybe in not great conditions, but it's led to something that I can look back and think it has had a real impact. And I feel proud of that. And I do think Athena SWAN is really important. But I think it absolutely highlights what Ivana said, that you have to have the buy-in of senior management. It has to be something that they care about. It cannot be a tick box exercise at all. And so I just wanted to say some of the things that I really think is valuable. One thing I do feel that was sort of slightly problematic was we were asked to do a survey. I think it's interesting because I really think you start with a portrait of your department, your institution, understanding where you are, and that allows you to formulate your own action plan, and I think that's really important. The survey that we were asked to use, we wanted to compare to other institutions. I didn't think it was a great survey, and I tried to sort of highlight that I didn't think it was a great survey, and I got lots of people writing back saying, this isn't a great survey. So if you were going to do something, you know, not necessarily Athena SWAN, but you really want to get a sort of baseline of your institution, I would think very carefully about the way you design the survey, because the point is you can keep reusing that. You can go back, you can collect the data, you can see how things are changing or where things aren't changing. So I think that's crucial. The other thing I think is surveys aren't enough, because by definition, there are very few females in your group. So you're going to have a sort of disproportionate view. So I think that really needs to be followed up with focus groups. We really need to talk to women and see what their experience is and what they need. But as I said, I think the positives of Athena SWAN is this continuity. You don't just, it's not a one-tick thing. You don't just do it and say, we're over. You do it, you go back and revisit it, you monitor your actions, you look at what was effective and what wasn't, and you keep on moving that forward. The other thing I think, as I think Ivana mentioned, this action plan. So it really determines, it's not just, oh, we need to do something. It's actually, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. Crucially, this is who is responsible, and this is how we'll know when we've achieved success. And I think that's really important. The other thing I really like is the applications. Successful applications are available online. People put them online. So at the same time, you're trying to look at your own institution, your own department. But for example, I looked at successful applications because you can always learn something from, you know, so Edinburgh had a silver award at the time we were going for bronze. So I thought, oh, hey, that's an interesting thing I hadn't thought about. So it's actually a really nice sort of implicit way of sharing good practice. You can go and look at these applications and get some inspiration. One thing I think was interesting, because I decided to go back and look at the survey data from when I did it and the survey data from the new application. And one of the things I thought was interesting, and I think it's worth people being aware of, is that things might seem to get worse before they get better. And I think one of the things that occurred to me is perhaps just this heightened awareness of the issues. Whereas before people were perhaps just like, yeah, it's all, you know, it's fine, it's good. But when we started raising awareness of, say, inequality in salaries and, you know, gender differences in salaries, people started going, hang on a minute, you know, this isn't quite as good as I thought it was. So I think you have to sort of be aware that you kind of have to name the problem, or the problem has to become visible, but then that allows you to tackle it. So yeah, I think, and just one more point if I have time. I think Athena SWAN is really positive because it does allow you to take an in-depth look and to really reflect on your institution and to really think about what you can do. But I think there are also things that we have to be aware of that aren't necessarily captured in something like Athena SWAN. It's not necessarily the be-all and end-all. And one of the things that I've experienced a lot recently is this issue around gender and hierarchy. And so more junior women who are in situations where they're perhaps experiencing bullying or harassment, who don't feel that they can necessarily bring that forward because the person they're going to talk to is on their promotion committee, because the person that, is going to write a letter of reference, because they're afraid to talk to someone, perhaps their male lecturer, who won't treat it in a way that they feel is satisfactory. So I think that's an important issue of being aware of having these, we've talked a lot about mentoring, but having these senior women, certainly from my perspective, it's something that I think I really want to take on for more junior women and help them and be the voice, because in a way, I think I don't have anything to lose at this point, but I think we need women to feel safe and know that there are other women who will take on things that they might find too difficult.
Thanks, Judith. Actually, just to add on that, that for the junior women and senior women, it's actually one of the surprisingly best actions that we have done as a committee in 10 years was actually the social events that I invented, which was just come to tea. But they were special because I used to send emails personally to all the senior women. And then all the junior women came, and we had these lovely kind of termly just tea sessions over coffee, we'll just discuss kind of those things. And lots of things kind of came out from those sections. And lots of the senior women got kind of, in a way you were kind of talking about it, they were kind of very kind of protective over the new junior women, to which we were also inviting postdocs. So it was really great for them. And it's just amazing how sometimes when you kind of go out of your way and you don't do the kind of tick box, but you actually really put a thought to what kind of is needed. Sometimes the solution can be very simple, but it just needs to be really personal. The minute the tick boxing starts, nobody cares. It's very hard to make an impact with tick boxing. It has to come from the heart. Even within Athena SWAN, which is useful but can be bureaucratic, even there, the people just simply have to, it's about making meaningful change with the heart. And that's the only ones that actually work kind of properly.
Thank you for your comment. I can open up for questions now, either online, if you want to type a question in, or from the room. If there's any more specific questions about the Athena SWAN initiative, I think we've had 2 very good insights from going through the procedure, but perhaps it's not entirely clear what Athena SWAN is all about. I'm not seeing anyone. I mean, this is certainly an initiative that I would very much like to see replicated in other countries in Europe. I'd certainly like to see it replicated in the Netherlands. But I haven't succeeded yet. But maybe with 3 professors from the Netherlands here on the table, maybe we can do something about it. Say your name and where you're from.
Thank you. Inna Tieli to Riga Technical University. I just have a very practical question. How much does the operation of the program cost nationally? Yeah. And if you can, sorry, and one more question, because I am aware also of Aurora program in UK, which I find is very, very relevant to work of our cost program. Project, and also if you are aware how much does it cost, this mentoring program for girls in academic institutions. Thank you.
I actually don't know how much Athena SWAN program costs, and actually it might be a good idea for this conference for next year to invite somebody who actually is from the charter itself, because both me and Judith are professors at universities who've implemented and applied for Athena SWAN application. But I think probably also for you, Linda, I think it's a great idea if you're thinking about it to actually get connected with Athena SWAN Charter itself, so somebody from the organization to actually talk about how did they actually set up the charter, because the charter is independent from universities totally.
No, I agree. That's true. That's true.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to make two quick points. So actually, but I think it leads me to an interesting point, which I think was the strength of Athena SWAN, was that there was an institutional level and a department level. So for example, in our case at Sussex, a lot of the things around mentoring, or we had women's action learning sets, which I found really helpful. Those were coming from the institutional level. So the budget was also coming from the institutional level. So there was a nice sort of synergy where we could work at our level, but also knowing that we could benefit from a lot of things that were happening more institution-wide. And then just one quick comment, which I only just realized about an hour ago, is apparently as of this year, Athena SWAN has introduced a new process. One is to look more at sort of the gender issue and not sort of have this sort of binary male-female thing. But the other thing that piqued my interest, and I haven't had time to look at it yet, was they maintain that they reduce the burden of administration with this new model by 50%. And I thought that's definitely, if people are thinking about doing something similar in other countries, I think it would definitely be worth looking into what they've done and how.
I mean, my observation is that of the departments I have heard of filling in the applications, which I confess I think is 3, it was all women that filled in the applications, and therefore it was done in free time. So it didn't cost them anything.
Yes. But I think that there is 2 different kinds of costs. So one cost is to individual universities and departments who are actually making an application. So it's the cost of all the committee and all the resources that the committee uses. And another cost is to actually maintain the charter itself, which is kind of independent from the universities. And I think probably a useful point is to try to kind of distinguish and investigate both. So the charter costs probably also quite a lot because, you know, the people who work there, all the administration, the applications, I mean, all of that needs to be organized somehow. And that's probably useful to find that information from the charter. How did they actually start and who actually funded that? When I'm to this day, actually, I'm not sure if it's the government who funded it, charity. I am not sure. That's probably a good idea because that's for the charter. And then for the individual universities and individual departments who are actually applying, of course, there's a cost of resources, which is all of us who are on the committee, which is cost of our time. And then there is also the costs which are to fund our activities. So the costs, for example, for us to fund activities came directly from the department. I basically, in 10 years, managed to get the Athena SWAN chair to sit on every management committee and every leadership committee in the department. And Athena SWAN chair now sits on promotion committee, leadership committee, management committee. The money is dedicated regularly to Athena SWAN in thousands. I mean, I did it. Yes, true, I'm a woman, but I made sure the head of the department is there all the time, head of the department. And that I think that mattered quite a lot. And it's true, it's harder. We had some male members on the committee, and as well, we had lots of postdocs who were male. And I think as a committee, Athena SWAN kind of advises you to have this, you know, members to have both women and men and to be balanced. And I think that formally we were really doing that. It's up to the committee to do that. I mean, I think it's one of the things that it's really important for the committee to do. But then at the end of the day, it is true that women do more, I guess, because it more affect our lives. So I think that's kind of the situation. And I think now I have a feeling that men are buying into it so much more. For example, now in our department, the head of the EDI is a man, and most of the stuff is now done by men. But that's because suddenly it has a value. Suddenly we got all these awards. We got Athena SWAN awards. We got 2 European awards. We made a real impact. We are now sitting on every management committee. This was all achieved in 10 years' time. And I got promoted based on that. I got from assistant professor to associate professor. I'm across the board, do everything else as well. But I think that put that kind of all the women and men who are part of the committee, it really put them up front. It kind of made them be their kind of visual. Like, everybody else was like, wow, well done. So I want to do that too, because I get an award too. So I think it really depends on how the committee, how do people then on the ground do that kind of thing. I think Athena SWAN gives an opportunity, but doesn't solve it. People on the ground have to also invest themselves in a way to make it happen.
There's a question from the chat for yourself and for Judith. Don't you see a danger in just hunting these awards for departments, and that you're moving away from the actual purpose of supporting women to filling in the boxes?
Yeah, I'm happy to say, yeah. I mean, I definitely see that, as I said, suddenly when it was possibly going to be criteria for obtaining funding, suddenly there was a lot of extrinsic motivation to care about these issues. So I think there is a danger, but I think as Ivana said, I think it's absolutely, and I was just about to write down what you'd said, because I thought it was such a beautiful quote. It gives you an opportunity to engage with these issues. It doesn't solve the problem, and I think that's it's how you engage. And as I said, I think the thing I really appreciated about Athena SWAN is really getting an in-depth picture of your environment of at every level, from students all the way through, and really being able to reflect on that. And if you go into it with that goodwill and the support, really being able to introduce change in your environment and really make a difference, because it's very personalized to where you are and where you want to go. So I think it depends very much on your attitude going in, I would say.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think both are important, because solving the problems and looking at the problems, I mean, we increased female academics for 10% in 10 years, from 2011 to 2021, from 11% to 21%. That wouldn't have happened without Athena SWAN. We introduced mentorship for our undergraduate students, for programming, for coding, because we discovered that girls who come in, actually, in general, are less good coders than boys. Now we have mentorships that basically department adopted Athena's scheme that we developed in our Athena SWAN committees. And now we pay senior students to be mentors to junior students. And we've seen massive improvement in the knowledge of the coding in girls. Like the level of impact, so we see tangible impact that was all driven by heart. All the women are much more connected to the social. I mean, I invited external speakers from America to these socials. I mean, I invited like Maya Matarich, who is really a famous robotics professor from US, who was visiting, and for some lecture, I told her, would you like to come for tea to our social to meet the other girls in the department? And it just kind of creates this, all of these activities have happened because I had time and support from my department to dedicate to these activities, because I wasn't given any other admin. My only admin was just Athena SWAN.
Can I ask you to make a final word, Ivana?
Yeah, and I think that's really important. So that's important. So we do go to the depth, but don't underestimate the importance of awards. Awards are important because resources are important, because somebody has to pay for it. The money has to come from somewhere. In the same way we all have to eat. We need awards so that the resources do come into that pot. So I always treat those two things very much like I find them both equally important. That's what I'm trying to say. So that's important, I think, in all of those who are those kind of committees.
Thank you very much indeed. Judith, do you have a last thing you want to say?
Yeah, I think the other thing that I thought is really worth mentioning is when you do this in-depth look, you're not necessarily always uncovering sort of, weaknesses or things like that. So one of the things that we found in contrast was that we had a much higher proportion of female students compared to males who were getting the top degree classification, so they were getting a first degree. So they overall were doing much better comparatively to males, and that's not necessarily something that we would have seen had we not looked at that data. But then it becomes the question of, well, how do we help these women to put themselves forward more, to be more, confident in their abilities, because they were clearly doing extremely well. So again, I think it's just having that, once you've got that data and that information, you can start making change.
Okay, thanks a lot. And I should point out that on the Informatics Europe webpage, there are statistics about departments in Europe, not in all the countries in Europe, but by many countries. And you can actually find out the differences in numbers, certainly of female, male students, and also some other information there. So there is some set of statistics that Informatics Europe collects. If your country's not in the Informatics Europe data selection, then it should be. And you should contact the Informatics Europe office to ask how that's possible. Advert for Informatics Europe there. Okay, so I'd like to move on to the next topic. So I would like to thank, please, Judith and Ivana for their extremely useful reports. And I'd like to move on to the next topic. Here we have Gabriella again. And this time she's not talking about a national network, but a local network. So similar to the T talks or sessions that Ivana was talking about, it's the women in ICS, computer science, or women in computer science network in the university. And also Gabriella has some connections in the faculty at the university, so she's going to give us a few insights, very briefly, about her role in the faculty and at the departmental level. Thank you, Gabriella.
Thanks, Linda. So the best person to actually talk about WIX would be Anja Volk, who was here earlier to talk about the music retrieval mentoring program she has there, and she has really been, I think, the main, or at least one of the main person to set up the Women in Computing group. And I did come to Utrecht University in 2018, end of 2018, and then I think WIX was already 2-3 years old or something. So I don't know precisely kind of how, but it started as a kind of networking group. So there were very few women in the computer science department in Utrecht, and it really, like in the last few years, we went up from, do you have the numbers? A few percent. Like in my group, I'm leading the software technology group, I think there was now women at all, including PhDs, and now we're basically 4 female members and 7 male. So the numbers really went up. So WIX started as a basically informal kind of networking group, and then took on more and more tasks over the time. So addressed issues, like for example, the different treatment, different lectures get from student evaluation, female versus like male lecturers, junior, more senior lecturers, and so on. And since I think last year, so it also kind of started to become more and more work, but WIX was not a kind of official committee or anything, so there was no official workload associated with it. And then at some point, it was clear for the department that the group is really important, because it took on a lot of issues that were relevant for a lot of staff members, and not just female staff members, also kind of have family-friendly policy, increasing the transparency, who can get a position on which committees, things like that. So from the Women in Computing group, actually, we started the diversity committee, departmental diversity committee, and like the IPN I talked earlier about, the diversity committee for the department also is not just about gender, but it's kind of diversity in general. And one big issue that comes up a lot is also, like in the last maybe 10 years, the department has become a lot more international, and officially all the correspondence and everything should be in Dutch and in English. In practice, it's often kind of problematic for people who don't speak Dutch in the first year to kind of get the communication, and so first WIX and then the diversity department committee basically took on this as well. And then on the basically faculty level, we also have a diversity committee, again, that also looks at kind of different dimensions of diversity. And there we address issues, for example, if you have interview committees for new positions, having basically a kind of clear policy, who should be on these committees, what should the procedure be, because there's not a lot of, like every department handles that differently, and this also does have a lot of impact on what happens then in what kind of people you employ if you have a very non-diverse committees there, which kind of things are valued, and how the CVs of the candidates are basically read. Yeah, so that's kind of the main summary. I try to keep it short, given that it's already fairly late.
We have plenty of time in Madrid time. I mean, I should also mention I've attended some of these WICS meetings, and it was very nice because you got the younger women, even students, that would attend. And then when the senior women were able to attend, they would. And I think at some point we had 3 professors in the room, all female, which I think the maximum in the department at the time. But still, we turned up. And it really sort of shows the younger women that you can be a professor and still talk about other stuff. And I was also educated very thoroughly about not gender diversity, the fluidity of gender. So I've been counting women for years, not personally, but looking to increase the number of women, and more recently realizing this is a more difficult dimension than it has been in the past. I don't know how we solve the issue, but at least we're now aware of the issue. And it was just good to be part of the network. And even in my career part, I'm not there for my career. I've done all the damage I can do. It's nice to help the younger women. So yeah, it was a very nice experience.
And so the WICS does invite, for example, the student people from the student, what they call the sticky and so on, student associations, or invited the dean to come and talk to people there. So try to reach out to kind of different people, also to different groups at other universities. And yeah, I do think it's really important to have female, or basically reach out to students, because they have, again, a very different outlook and opinions about how to best address these issues.
That's true. Okay, thank you very much, Gabrielle, for this contribution. Now it's over to you, online or in the room. I've really tried to feed you as much information as I possibly could. I'm very grateful to my panelists from all over the place to inform you as fast as we possibly can. What next? How can we use EUgain as a network to build on these things? How can we share best practices? What are your own ideas? I'd love to hear some of your inspirations you've had at the coffee break. Anyone willing to share? Yes, I see a hand.
Yes, just one practical thing. We have heard so many perfect and so nice examples and possibility to join. So maybe this information could be put on the EUgain webpage with the contacts, so that people have opportunity to contact directly the networks.
I don't know if there was any report taking going on during the session.
On the web page. Also, the links, put it in the chat, which were given today, will also be available.
But I mean, maybe as a one page on the main web page, having like information of other networks, like permanently.
Okay, on the EUgain page.
Yes, yes, yes.
Aha.
That I meant.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a good suggestion.
Ivica, you are asking about deliverable 2, because deliverable 2 is exactly about what you are asking, and Bara, Maria, Valentina, and I are working at this, and it will come on the EUgain page, and these slides are part of the deliverable. So yeah, we have to. We don't have any choice. It's a deliverable is written in the work and budget plan.
Does this mean my plenary discussion is over? You're doing it for us.
We also are very happy. I've had like emails from some European universities email me directly to maybe share some information. And I think it's probably a good idea, in addition to information about network, to maybe have some contacts, some people who went through the process before, been involved for a long time, and that can maybe provide some, I wouldn't say mentoring, but for sure, like we've had some meetings with different people from Europe, from different universities, and just like, and I'm very happy to put my name to be there, or I'm sure lots of other people. I mean, it's actually part of also, I'll mention Athena SWAN again. There's a whole area called beacon activities. So actually, we are very encouraged to support others and other universities around the world. So I think that's probably another thing that could be go in that kind of website, that kind of information package. I think for me, I think everybody has so many different ideas, and I think lots of ideas can be fantastic. I think probably the biggest obstacle is the lack of time and resources and commitment from the senior management and above. And I think for me, that is the one thing that is probably the biggest, because you need a working team and research who will dedicate the time, effort, and money to making the change. And how can that happen? And if everybody was, in their working groups to think about just that question of what's the sustainable way of doing this and committing to do that, because you need sometimes 10 years to make a change. And I think that is the biggest question. Athena SWAN is just one way of doing it. It's, as we said, me and Judith, it provides an opportunity because it creates the commitment from the management, and people can use it in different ways. It can become like a bureaucratic obstacle, but in the same time, it can be used for much greater good. I think that's quite important to create that kind of commitment, something similar to that.
It's certainly true that the Athena SWAN initiative that you're talking about is not just for computer science, which is correct, of course. And I think in the Netherlands, a very influential group was I have to translate this from Dutch, the National Network for Female Professors. And this was started up with a few women about 15 years ago. And somehow they got some sort of funding, perhaps some sort of charitable funding to start with, until they were funded by the ministry. And now they have a permanent office. And what they did wasn't quite like Athena SWAN, but they would go to the rectors of the universities once a year and talk to the rectors of the universities about their particular policy on women. And I remember one year where they invited a number of rectors to a meeting. I think there was 4 that turned up. I think because they were the 4 universities that were really thinking about this, and the others were less interested. But because of continual pressure, the other universities eventually caught on. But you're right. I mean, I said this organization is 15 years old.
And that is great. I mean, it's just a question, were they, I mean, I think it's really important that they were rewarded for it. That wasn't just on top of everything else they were doing. And I think this reward, this kind of creating the time and space, and then getting maybe promoted for it, being respected for it. Because if activities like these are equalized as activities like teaching or other management roles, then we are somewhere. Then that's just part of your job description. I mean, for me, I made it part of just my job description. it was like, well, I'm not going to be doing this and this and this. I'm going to choose that. You see, and when that happens, then you're paid to do it. You're rewarded for it, and then people are going to do it.
I certainly agree, but my own experience is if you don't start as a volunteer first, you don't get the first stage.
And that's where but that's where Athena SWAN comes. If university and department have to do it,
sure,
then the call is out there. It has to happen. And so the volunteers and people who are motivated suddenly have a space to do this in a way which is good for them, which is rewarded, because otherwise it would be just a few motivated people who are kind of, it needs so much more energy for just a little group from the ground to do something, rather than when it's already created for you. With all its faults, every system has faults and bureaucracy and everything. It's just a question of whether I think it's useful that something exists.
Can I make a quick comment on that? Because I think, I said sort of bad things about being in Athena SWAN earlier, but it's been really positive. So I've moved to the Netherlands. I'm at the University of Amsterdam. And when I met the head of my institute, he said, I've noticed on your CV that you were involved in Athena SWAN. And I thought, oh gosh, here we go again. But he said, I've looked at that initiative. I've seen a video from people at UCL, and it was really inspiring. And I'd really like us to do something here. And I'd really like you to be involved in this. And I said to him point blank, I said, you have to take this on. This has to be your thing. This has to be something you care about. And he said, you have to devote, as you said, the time and the resources. And he is. And so in some sense, this is a nice example of something like Athena SWAN has sort of spoken to someone at the top who's been inspired by that and who's willing, and he mentioned it again. We had a sort of first meeting of everyone in the Institute for probably over 2 years, and he brought that up again, saying, this is not something you solve, this is something that you commit to for 5 years, 10 years. So it's just a nice example of how Athena SWAN can inspire, not just from the bottom, but from the top as well.
Well, that's a great message to end on, I think. Okay, are there any more comments from the audience? Otherwise, I think I'll close our session. And then I would like to thank all our panelists very much. So the panelists in the room, Gabriela, Judith, and Lafifa, and also our online panelists, Ivana. Thank you.